Hey, happy Friday. It's Jennifer Wilson here at Leadership Lunch Chat with my good friend Amy Vetter. And we're here to talk about leadership insights in the profession. And today we're going to talk about lifelong learning and the importance of each of us, regardless of age, stage, level, role, how close to retirement, or how new to the business that we are, regardless of all of that, that we should all be working to elevate our skills and not just our technical skills, but the skills sometimes called soft skills, which are actually the hardest to develop, perhaps, and the most avoided. And I think a lot of people get to a certain level in life and they think, I got here and I don't need that stuff. And Amy and I both sell leadership development services in different ways, but complementary and similar. And we're in the same conversation and we're trying so hard to be better leaders ourselves all the time. And commonly, when we're in conversations with firms, the leaders say, well, let's give these skills to the young people, but we don't need them. And we're like, or at Convergence, we say that's an anti-retention strategy because the young people see that the emperor has no clothes when we finish. They realize, holy cow, if these are best practices, people around here above me aren't doing them. So anyway, I think that's a great topic. Amy thought that it was an important one for us to talk about. So Amy, maybe you take it away.
Yeah. And I think starting with ourselves, when we get to a certain level, a lot of times, what gets hard is finding exactly what you need to take yourself to the next level. And the problem is that I think as people grow in their experience, people around that, you're put in this position to constantly coach, mentor, give advice. And then there's this feeling like, well, what would you need to learn? And that's the thing is every year, I know I step back and I know Jennifer is always learning as well. And learning can be like, I know Jennifer, you do a ton of reading and keeping up with that, but learning can be anything, but it is important that it's not just on technical issues, that it's on just human issues. And, we don't spend enough time on that to actually keep improving ourselves. And when we improve ourselves, it improves the people around us as well. And so really looking deep into what you need each year is important, and surfacing that up if you're in an organization of what are the things you would like to learn or keep growing in. And sometimes you just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But, for me, I do that assessment of trying to figure out, like, based on where the business is going, what other education can I learn or grow from as well to keep expanding my skill set. And I've just always felt continuous learning is such an important thing. I think that a lot of times, like what you said, Jen, is, inside training organizations are like, the leaders just don't have time. They're, for them to, it's an expensive thing for leaders to take time away to do training, but it's actually the best investment you can make. But you've got to go through the process to understand, but also be very clear on what are the objectives that all of you need as well. And are you listening to the organization to see, where your time should be spent as far as learning?
Yeah, so much there. Emily posted, I'm a lifelong learner. I love this. Learner's one of my StrengthsFinder strengths, and it's one of mine. It's probably one of your top 5 gifts or whatever. And so not everybody is that. That was a big aha for me. Not everybody is what I'm going to call a primary source learner, where they're the one that's going to go do the reading, do the thinking, do the frameworking to figure it out. A lot of others need people like you or me or others that have done the learning to simplify it and share it.
Mhm.
Share it in podcasts, share it in live streams, share it in blogs, share it in training, whatever, workshops, whatever it might be. And just knowing what kind of learner you are would be helpful. Knowing how you consume learning and what the best way to consume learning is for you, and being intentional and thinking, what am I going to learn this year? One thing, this is, you could say this isn't really a soft skill and it's not inside leadership, but in my opinion, it's both. Everybody should be learning AI, generative AI, and should have a 4.0 very inexpensive ChatGPT account and be learning Query. And you could say, well, Jen, that's technical, and I'd say, yeah, not really. It's understanding something super conceptual that's about to be embedded in pretty much everything that we do, and it's already been embedded in a lot of stuff that we do. I've been bossed around by AI on Maps and OpenTable and a bunch of other travel apps and things that I use. They've been following me and feeding me all kinds of ideas for years. But just understanding that as an example, I meet people all the time, Amy, that are like, well, I'm 5 years out or 7 years out. I don't think I need to learn AI. And I'm like, are you kidding? You need to know AI so you can actually interact with your grandkids and stuff. What are you, like, you're not going to be able to get money out of a cash box without it. You're like, come on, the paradigm is, this is how our world will be operating. This is the new operating system, or whatever you want to call it. Learn it, everybody, regardless of age. And so I don't understand that, like, I'm too old to do it or something. I don't get that one. I don't ever feel like that. I hope I never do. I mean that. I just hope I never feel like, well, I can let that one pass me. I don't understand why we would, because I think all learning elevates your quality of life and the quality of conversations that you can have with other people. And so anyway, I'm calling us all to understand our learning style. The only other thing that I want to say is I can tell if somebody's working on leadership learning, if they can tell me like their most significant areas for improvement, or biggest sort of genetic flaws that inhibit their leadership. And if they are A, willing to share them, vulnerability, B, can easily share them, like their top of mind, tip of tongue, like I share these, I talk about them. And then what they're doing now to work on them, like what are some of their strategies. And the reason that that's so important is because great leaders acknowledge those things that are probably embedded and will show up when you're tired, hungry, grouchy, under pressure and stress. And they give permission to other people around them to call them on it. And they've talked about them enough with other people that people coach them and push them on them. And so they're really close to their heart. And I don't think it would shock Amy. One of mine is I am a dominant leader. I'm a high D. You put me in a room full of people, I'll figure out how to lead them. I won't actually sit there and think, how can I lead them? I'll just start leading them without permission, perhaps, and verbally. And so my number one way of managing that is shut up. Put your hand over your mouth figuratively, sit back, listen, watch the dynamics of the room, figure out what the role is that you need to play here. Now, if I got hired to lead, I'm going to lead. That's no problem. But also in the presence of a dominant leader, people can coast and they cannot take responsibility for leading themselves inside that relationship. And you can overlead so that they underlead and they never develop. And there's all these issues with it that I have to be so aware of and work on to make space for other leadership styles and make space for other viewpoints and ideas. And it's something I've been conscious of for years. And I try lots of different things to do it, but I also confess it so that other people can go, hey, dude, let me in.
Yeah. Being aware of that is really, really important. And I think even, if you're tired, if you're in a mood from something else, like being able to just say what those things are. I mean, I know myself as a leader, so when I'm not so into this profiling, I will have to say I don't like personality tests because I think they pigeonhole people and then everyone gets this brand based on it. So I think they're good informational. I do think they
Yeah,
shift um, over
for
time
sure.
based on your
100%.
circumstances. But I know when I took that years ago, I was like exactly in the middle of D&I outside the circle. Like they basically said, this is just not a common place to
Well,
see
and
adults.
I don't care what assessment I take, it's the same answer. I'm the conductor, whatever it is, I'm that,
Yeah.
so I get you.
But I think, what that really like is and does show up for me is, I'm a visionary. I have lots of ideas. And what I have had to learn over time is when I'm overwhelming people with my ideas, and be able to slow them down and not feel like they all have to get done right now. And so I think a lot of leaders, especially when you're running a business, it's hard because there's lots of things you want to do and you've got limited resources. But it's really the same thing in a corporation. You've got limited resources and limited skill sets of what people are actually capable of doing. And unless you want to be working around the clock, it's not productive, to keep pushing on things that it's just overwhelming. So I know for me, one of the things I do to catch myself is every 6 months, we actually re-strategize and make sure like we're not off plan. And most of the time, if we're off plan, it's my fault. Like I've had another idea that we should shift. And so I then have to reel it in and say, where do we need to focus? And I know this year when we did our planning, I even started feeling the pressure because and also like usually you attract people that are also excitable. They wouldn't be working with you if they didn't like the fact that you've got new ideas. It's stressful, but they like it, right? So, but one of the things that I kept putting forward for all of them and myself was, this is already sounding like too much. What do we need to shift? Because I know where we end up going, and then you just get too overwhelmed and the system gets too overwhelmed, and you can feel it as a leader. And I think it's important to have that awareness of it. And that's why the learning's so important, because when I do outside learning, I remember I got to hone this back in and be very clear on what the path is that I want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you and I are able to presence two things right away, right? And we might both have each other's as well a little bit. But what's our audience working? Like what is your thing? And maybe it's not just one thing, it could be multiple things, but like what are those inherent issues? And one thing, I've had some internal conversations. Our team just came back from a 2-day leadership workshop that we produce 3 times a year. And it's the funnest thing ever. I'm always so jealous that I'm not there facilitating it. And one of our team members, Caroline, who runs this StreamYard platform and these live streams every week for us, she, one of the big distinctions she got was the inner dialogue and the power of the inner voice. She already had it walking in the door because we teach it in our work to each other and talk about the power of interpretation and the power of self-talk and the power of judgment of others, and just that whole inner voice. And it's honestly mostly undermining behavior of all human beings, not just some of us, all of us. And most organizations don't discuss it, they don't teach it, they don't orient it on it, they don't give permission to discuss it. So you can't say, listen, I'm in this meeting and here's what my inner dialogue is screaming over here in this meeting. Everybody would look at that person and say, you're weird. for the most part. That inner conversation isn't part of business, but it is. It drives us, it runs us. And so that's an example of where a leadership team, inner dialogue drives selfish interest, and selfish interest drives manipulation. Manipulation drives distrust of each other as fellow leaders. And that's the beginning of dysfunction of leadership teams. And we see it all the time. So this idea of like, I'm a leader and I'm at the executive table, I don't need leadership. Yeah, we better have some really intensive and ongoing leadership to talk about selfish interest, talk about, inner dialogue, talk about genetic flaws, and figure out how we can maximize our performance as a team by trusting each other, by trying to help each other maximize selfish interest, by complementing each other's flaws, covering them, helping each other, elevating each other despite them, all of that stuff, instead of talking bad about them in the hallway, which is where all of dysfunction lives. And gosh, I just wish that everybody understood how awesome it could be if we were all in the constant dialogue of leadership elevation.
Right. Some of that inner dialogue happens when you're in fear of whatever is being discussed, where you feel like you're not going to be an expert in that, or what does that mean for me? That's the selfish interest, right? And so when I think, the most important thing is that awareness of the inner dialogue, so that when it happens, you can question it. Like, why am I having that thought? So that I can have like that check and balance of just not letting that thought run away and get in the way of progress. And like you said, turn into gossip or other things that aren't productive for the organization. But what is it that can trigger me to be like, oh, that thought is not helpful? And what do I need to do to reframe? And what do I need to say is the help that I need in order to be successful in something that I have fear of, right? And just admitting that is a really big thing. And I just got reminded, this week doing this training is I have a clip from a podcast that I did with Alan Colton, and he talked about the difference between leadership and management, and that leadership is the person setting vision and strategy and moving the organization forward, and management is getting the best out of your people and really understanding where your best place is sometimes too. And part of being a good leader is understanding who would be the best person in these different situations, that it's not always you, and it can be other people. And what that is really important to understand is that I don't have to feel like I'm a failure if that's not a natural tendency of mine or something that I'm not good at. I actually help that person by getting the right person involved that can get the best out of people. So I think it's just really important that we don't lose sight of where our strengths are and have that self-awareness of that, so that we can be the best that we can be each day, because no one goes to work wanting to do a bad job or to be frustrated each day. Like, that's no fun. So, it's these things that we can identify in ourselves that move us forward.
Yes. And it starts with a commitment to individual, personal, responsible, get better. And not, how can I make other people better?
Right.
Must be them. How can I get better? And man, when you bring that responsibility back over here on your side, it's a lot of power to cause that ripple Amy talked about earlier. That change in others comes from change in us. And anyway, I love it. I love this conversation. I'm sure we could do more of it. We're going to wrap for today. Really appreciate everybody attending and love your thoughts and comments. Please share them in social as you hear this conversation. We'd love to hear what your strategies are for getting better and for elevating your leadership. And we'd love to hear what else you'd like to talk to us about. Put it in social or email Amy or I. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks everybody for being here today. We're really grateful.